Welcome to Post Games, a podcast about how and why we love video games. I am your host, Chris Plant. I am so happy to have you here as we settle into the vacation months when the pressure of school and work temporarily diminishes because you're traveling, or at least your boss is. To embrace the chill of the hottest months, I am producing a series of kind of soothing conversations on video game reviews. What can a game review accomplish? How do scores work? Why is review discourse perpetually boiling on social media? And why are critics some of the most popular parasocial relationships on the internet? I'll be chatting with critics across different forums, including websites, podcasts, and video. The series will be spread across the summer and early fall, but I'm kicking things off with 2 episodes that establish not just the point of reviews, but their potential. This week, I chat with Harper J., who wrote one of my favorite pieces on the topic, Video Game Criticism is a Kindness. And next week, I will chat with Christian Donlan, the award-winning critic and author who is one of the medium's best and most prolific critics. These are 2 spectacular conversations that left me utterly inspired. I hope they do the same for you. So, this week on Post Games, what's the point of video game reviews? Act 1, why video game criticism is a kindness. Act 2, what a game review can and can't do. Patreon supporters, you'll also get a bonus segment in which I answer the questions you sent in on game reviews, like why do so few game critics use the full 10-point scoring system? I will say for free listeners, if you are listening right when this comes out, you can get your first month of Patreon Post Games for $2. That is going until July 9th as part of the holiday weekend sale. And the Patreon will work with your podcast app of choice, so you can have all the bonus episodes and bonus segments sent to wherever you prefer to listen. I'll also add no news of the week segment because I think it's quite obvious I am recovering from a brutal cold, but I rallied to get this episode to you, so you had something fresh for your summer travels. If you enjoy it in the theme of reviews, please consider leaving your own review on Apple Podcast. I'd really appreciate it. Anyway, let's get to it. As a video game journalist who has been doxxed, I am constantly preaching the message of personal data hygiene. Every person, not just journalists, should be aware of how much of their personal information, phone numbers, addresses, health information, and more is available on the internet, and that those private details are being sold without your consent by data brokers and can be used for scams, harassment, and other illegal activities. The problem is so big and so widespread that you could lose entire days to finding who has your info, requesting that they remove it, and keeping these bad parties accountable. That is why I recommend Incogni. The moment you subscribe and authorize removal, Incogni begins searching data brokers, online directories, people databases, and commercial databases. You get to watch it happen in real time on the dashboard. When I signed up, over 200 removal requests were sent instantly. Within 30 minutes, 60 requests have been completed. That's not just a number. I can see the actual list of data brokers that have been contacted and begun the data removal process. Because, my friends, trust is good, but when it comes to safety, I want to see those results. But Incogni's work doesn't end there. It keeps checking back in with data brokers because with new personal data hacks, your info can begin to crop up in some of those old, gnarly places. And if you find your info somewhere, you can even send them a link and they'll work to get it removed. After going independent, I began searching for the right data personal removal service. Incogni is exactly what I was looking for and has already brought me tremendous peace of mind. To get an exclusive 60% off an annual Incogni plan, go to incogni.com/postgames or click the link in the episode description box. That's incogni.com/postgames. Alienware's Back to School event is the perfect time to score top gaming gear with incredible features and Intel Core processors to go beyond performance. Save big on gaming's desktops, laptops, and more. Start your Alienware journey with the Alienware 15 gaming laptop featuring Intel Core processors. Smoothly game, live stream, and multitask for hours on end. Plus, play through every game exactly how you want with the customizable Alien FX lighting across your Alienware ecosystem, creating your very own gaming profile and more. Finally, pair your incredibly smooth gaming experience with immersive visuals and sound by saving on sleek Alienware monitors, headsets, and more. This limited time sale awaits you now. Alienware.com/deals. That's Alienware.com/deals. Act 1. Why Video Game Criticism is a Kindness. Harper J. is a writer and critic who has written some of the most exciting, thoughtful, and enlightening critiques of video games from the past decade. Much of their work has appeared on Kotaku, where between 2016 to 2020, they wrote full-time. Between 2020 and 2025, they worked as a content and community manager at Double Fine, and now they've returned to freelance writing, meaning you can see Harper's criticism across the internet once again. So I'm doing this larger project about video game reviews, and what the hell are these things? Abstracted through text and podcast and video. You have the fortune or misfortune of being the very first person that I'm speaking with. So just up top, I would love you to set a baseline. What are the different approaches to criticism you see in games today? And by that, I should be really clear. I don't mean video or audio. I mean, what are the different reasons it's being used?
I had a conversation recently with some younger writers who, I love talking with younger writers, but I always feel like they think I'm stodgy because I have a lot of strong opinions. But it's really easy when you think about it in terms of history, right? So it's a matter of early on, game reviews were really heavily product review, toy review. And that is certainly an approach that I think some people still want to see today. I don't know if it's correct, but it is one which exists. I think as you head into the 2000s, you get your new games journalism, Kieran Gillen, real personal stuff, which is an approach that is still taken sometimes as in, what did this do to me, or what were the circumstances of my personal experience playing this game. That happens a lot. I like to think that the style of when I was writing in the 2010s was almost a response to some of that, some of what and those folks were doing, or people like Kara Elson, which is we wanted to recenter things back a little bit on the game and make it literary criticism again. What is the story being told, and what are the mechanisms for producing that story? And now modern criticism, modern product review is a little hazier. I think in some ways it has slipped back towards pure product review, which is fine. But I think that's not like a judgment. I think it's more of something that came about because economics are tougher. So a lot of time now, we'll talk even more, I'm sure, about all sorts of approaches, but I think there's value right now to telling people, what does this game do and what will you get from it when you just sit down to play it, in a pretty direct way, because the hobby itself is slowly freezing people out in terms of cost. So just telling people, hey, this is what the game does mechanically, this is the experience you will have, and allowing people to make the monetary judgment of is that worth my money, there's a lot of appeal to that right now. It's not my favorite way to approach a game review personally, but I understand why a lot of people find it very compelling and important right now, especially in the 2020s.
Your word choice there is really interesting to me, because I think an assumption would be, is this good or bad? Is it worth X number of dollars? But what you're saying of what does it do and how does it make me feel feels more appropriate to this moment of not just an economy of money, but an economy of time.
Yes.
Where, the supposed promise of things like Game Pass was, you won't need reviews anymore because you can go try it yourself.
Anything you want whenever you want.
And the reality is, who has time to go try anything? That ended up being a total fiction. Nobody wants to live the life of a games journalist on top of their other job, it turns out. I do want to talk about your specific approach, because you have described your approach as something akin to travel writing. And I'm curious what you mean by that.
So what I mean by that is, it's not quite as personal as something you'd get from like a new games journalist from the turn of the century, which is a funny way to phrase it, the turn of the century. But that is what it is at this point, which was centered more about what did that produce in me in the moment, or how did that relate to the sickness my father was having at the time, or something like that. When I think about game review as travelogue, it's like I'm telling another hiker about my experience on a trail. And from that story, they then can decide whether or not that is a trail they want to hike, or if just hearing the story was enough for them, or things like that. So I think the approach that I personally like to take in games review is a very bare minimum amount of historical context, which I think is important. Some people do a lot more historical context at the start of their reviews than probably is necessary. Very briefly explaining like, hey, when I fight a battle, this is what I do. And then I played this for 80 hours, and this is what happened to me emotionally. Here were the challenges I faced, and this is how I felt when I reached the end of the destination, right? And in travelogue metaphor, some of that also becomes like, here are the characters I met along the way, or here are the particular sites I saw, which I think you should pay attention to if you also go to Italy or whatever, right? So travel is a good analogy for it. It's tricky because I think a struggle right now, tied to what we were saying before, is I think there is a perception from some folks that review can't contain criticism right now, is something I've heard sometimes, which is to say that review is not a place where critical analysis can happen. I don't think that's true. If I'm telling you Death Stranding's the easy one because the mechanics are the metaphor or the story or the blah, blah, blah. But if I say, hey, I put down a ladder and later on my friend found that ladder and he crossed it. That's like, I'm telling you the raw systems and the mechanics of the game, but then I can also say, and because the game is making us do this, this is why I think the game is making us do this, or this is how that moment of gameplay relates to the story, or things like that, right? Because games are just big bundles of metaphor, like constantly. That's all they are, right? So even if you describe a mechanic, you are describing a rhetoricism at the same time, I think.
I love this metaphor that you have of travel too, because for me, great travel writing is taking all the verbs that you have in your day-to-day life and putting it in a new context and revealing how that place changes them, right? That suddenly you're eating, or you're going for a walk, or you're hopping on a bus, and it's a totally different thing. And great travel writing is helping you to make that break, to when you do go to Italy, to actually experience the experience rather than kind of continue to live the same life that you've always been living. Or it helps you do that even without taking the trip, right? There is this tourist experience, this vicarious living that you get through it. And I love that when I think of how you write about games, and that climbing a ladder, shooting, because that's every video game almost, like all these verbs are familiar, but when you put it in the context of how does it fit into this location, how does it fit into my experience of it, suddenly it changes entirely. And I think that's just such a great way of talking about it. All of this is, I think, softer than the word criticism is often associated with.
Yes.
I think criticism is seen as a hard word. I want to talk about your piece because
Sure.
before we even started, you were talking about how this kind of follows you. And you wrote a piece called Games Criticism is a Kindness. You wrote this a few months into the COVID-19 pandemic. When people hear games criticism is a kindness, I think there's some working critics who are like, yeah, of course. I think many people are like, what the hell are you talking about? So what the hell are you talking about?
Art is a conversation, right? I think there are two things true about art. I think the first, and this is one that's happened to be like really ingrained in me over the last couple of years as I've written like personal projects. One, I think art is mostly a thing done for the sake of the artist, which is to say there's a thing inside of you and you need to get it out one way or another. And you put that out there. But then the result of putting that out into the world is that a conversation happens. And the problem with art is that sometimes like what you want to say isn't what you entirely do communicate, but that is what criticism is there to determine. It's there to look at the thing that you made and say like, what is this flat out like simply doing? And then conversing with the message that like the artist sent. And I think that conversation, even if very rarely I think that conversation is like antagonistic, I think it is like very collaborative. I'm a weirdo who I think believes in the existence of the eternal soul. So I think that when you are engaging with art, you are probably engaging with like an actual part of a person somehow in like some strange magical like Alan Moore bullshit type way. And I think that deserves like paying very close attention to it, with the exception of things that are blatantly racist or something, right? But most of the time, even if a thing is kind of mid, by the nature of the fact that somebody worked on it, it deserves your attention, it deserves your consideration, and it deserves your good faith when you are exploring what it is doing. And I think when sometimes people think of criticism, they think it's like, you know, say like you just wrote a chapter of a story or something, and I go, hey, that was a good chapter. That was really fun. Also, here's a list of all the things I hated. And you're like, well, that is criticism of a sort, and it can be helpful. But also it's like, why don't you tell me how it made you feel? Or why don't you tell me also a thing you thought was good and why it was good and how that moment happened? Because those are just as important as saying the gunplay sloppy and I felt like I was in molasses or whatever. All those things are important, and the work is like one big bundle of 9 different contradictory things that you're experiencing at once. You should be willing to talk about all of them delicately and seriously, I think.
Let's push this to its furthest point.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to think of a game that maybe that you really do not enjoy, you have many issues with, not that it's racist or fascist or any of these things, but that it's just in many ways poor. How is it still a kindness when you are critiquing it?
Sure. There's a short list of games that I've played which I've stopped playing. There's 5 of them. I try to finish every game I play, which is like a sicko behavior, but I try and do it. One that sticks out in my memory is Ubisoft's Watch Dogs. I think that game is like kind of morally repugnant, right? Which is a strong thing to say, but I think as a game which wants to explore the surveillance state, the ways in which it then gamifies the pleasure of engaging with that surveillance state is like really gross. And I think the first game, particularly, its protagonist is very selfish and uncaring. So like that's an example of a game I hate. You can also tell that Ubisoft knew people felt this way about that game, because the second game was like, what if we made a bunch of plucky, nice people? But even though I hate that game, probably hate, strong word, but I'll use it just for the sake of being rhetorically like compelling in what I say. I don't want to say I slightly dislike that game.
Yeah.
That's another thing. If you're going to say something, have the balls to say it.
Yeah.
It's fine. I hate Watch Dogs, but I can sit down and I can talk about like the tension of gamifying all those surveillance systems, but I can also talk about, hey, this, when you look at it, still does try and create a complex portrait of like citizens in a urban cityscape or something, and that's interesting too. And so there's a lot of things I can engage with in that work, even if I don't like it.
Yeah. When you mentioned Watch Dogs 2, Ubisoft changes the entire tone and style, that is, I think, a reaction to the criticism, which is ultimately a service to them. So I see exactly what you mean. I also know that there are some people who are listening right now who heard that about Watch Dogs. And, well, I don't know. And not many people like the original Watch Dogs, but I'm sure there were one or two who were like, how could you dare say this about my game, my very precious, special game? And this is universal. This could have been any game that we had named here. Why do we sometimes take bad reviews so personally? And I know that we all do. Everyone has that reaction now and then.
I worked at a game studio for the last 5 years. People at game studios work very hard. Making a game, we say it very often, right, in articles or just in conversation, making a video game is very hard. It's a miracle. It takes people doing different things in a highly coordinated, stressful, and not always competitively paying space, depending on who you are. And so that struggle, that act of creation, it makes you feel really a lot of ownership over what you're making, which you should. You should always feel ownership over a thing you're making. But bad reviews feel personal, I think, for two reasons. One, partially just because of what I'm alluding to here, which is creation, especially over the course of a long time, and games take a long time to make, builds attachment, and you don't want to. The last thing you want, if Psychonauts 2 had released and everyone said this is terrible, I would have felt bad. I would have felt very bad. But at the same time, I think also negative reviews or reviews which are challenging, let's say, maybe is a better way to characterize it, feel bad because I'll say two reasons. One, they're not very common. We're not very good, either as artists or as critics, in dealing with disagreement with things we've done. This is true both of people who make art, but also this is true of there used to be an ecosystem in which critics would disagree with each other openly and blog and do letter writing series to each other anymore. That just doesn't really exist anymore because people are, for whatever reason, probably just because life is hard right now, people are very, very defensive, and that's fair. I also think that sometimes when people are talking negatively about a thing, they're bad at it, which is a funny way to phrase it. They're bad at being bad. But what I mean is they don't identify why a thing isn't working for them. They simply identify that a thing is not working for them. And they'll say something like, well, that was bad, or that was bloated, or hey, I really hated this. And a lot of people are not good at explaining why they feel a certain way. And I think if you are able to explain why you feel a certain way, even if ultimately the person behind the piece of work disagrees with you, that's fine, because you're still engaging with them honestly and saying, this is why I think this didn't work for me. But it's a lot of times people just kind of go, this was bad, this was too short, this was dumb. They don't really identify why something is happening. They just kind of say that a thing is happening. They don't go a little bit, it sounds arrogant to say, but they should dig a little deeper, right? If somebody is saying, hey, this section of the game felt bloated, why did it feel that way? Is it something as simple as too many enemy encounters? Is it that you've not swapped up from one gameplay mode to another in a long time? Sometimes it's practical stuff. Other times it's hey, we just had a big story event and now you're making me do 30 fetch quests. And that's why it feels bloated, because it doesn't feel emotionally appropriate for the moment, right? And you have to figure out why a thing is making you feel a certain way.
One thing I love about summer is how easy everything feels. The days are a little more relaxed, and I find myself reaching for the same comfortable go-anywhere pieces again and again. That is why I keep coming back to Quince. They focus on well-made essentials that naturally become those everyday staples you actually live in all season long. Quince's 100% European linen pants and shirts are breathable, easy to throw on, and the summer upgrade your rotation needs, starting at just $34. Their tees are soft enough to live in all day, and the lightweight cotton sweaters are exactly what you want when summer nights cool down. Everything at Quince is priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands. They work directly with ethical factories and cut out the middlemen, so you're paying for exceptional quality, not brand markup. During the summer, I want to look nice, but I also don't want to be, just in a hot, warm, uncomfortable, stiff, sweaty shirt. That is why I go for the 100% European linen or relaxed short sleeve shirt. Looks oh so good on me if I can be a little vain. And it's not just the clothing. Quince has become a trusted favorite for everything from home to travel to everyday essentials. Make your summer wardrobe easier. Go to quince.com/postgames for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. Now available in Canada too. That is QUINCE.com/postgames for free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/postgames. I know how it is. It's the end of the day. You're feeling hungry. You're starved, actually. But you have done so much and you still have so much to do. How are you going to have time to make something that is both tasty and healthy? You want to, but you can't. For me, eating healthy isn't a willpower problem. It's a setup problem. That is, until I found Factor. Factor makes it so easy to have fully prepared meals designed by dietitians and crafted by chefs that are, best of all, delivered right to my front door, ready for me to prepare in a jiffy. With Factor, I'm hitting my nutrition goals this season without the planning, without the grocery runs, or the cooking. I am loving so many of the dishes, but right now, the stuff that's sticking out is a bit more summery. The Asian-style chicken crunch salad, the tzatziki salmon and lemon rice, the black bean taco bowl, all just so yummy. Factor has meals built around your goals, whether that's weight loss, overall nutrition, more protein, or GLP-1 support. And every meal is crafted with functional ingredients, lean proteins, colorful veggies, whole foods, and healthy fats. Factor bans 175 plus ingredients. No artificial colors or sweeteners. It's fresh, never frozen. Factor offers over 100 rotating weekly meals, including globally inspired flavors like Mediterranean and Asian, so there's always something new to look forward to. And it is ready in 2 minutes. Factor shops, preps, cooks, and delivers straight to your door, so you have more time for everything you love this spring and the summer as it hits. I am so grateful to have this stress taken off my plate so I can focus on eating what is on my plate. I think that you are going to enjoy it too. Head to factormeals.com/postgames50 off and use code postgames50 off to get 50% off and free daily greens per box with new subscription only while supplies last until September 27th, 2026. See website for more details. Act 2. What a game review can and can't do. Do you think that there is a habit, and this isn't pointing at games critics, but like how many of us, like games culture at large talks about games, that to say there were too many enemies in level 3 is seen as childish, and therefore people often shift the focus of criticism to what did this game mean? Was this game saying something
I kind of see what
that
you're
is
saying.
of value?
I think sometimes people reach to find the profundity of a thing a little bit, which is maybe not entirely what you're alluding to, but I guess what I mean there is sometimes the solution or the reason behind something is far simpler than maybe someone wants to admit. Sometimes it really is like, hey, I had to do this racing thing for 3 hours and I wanted to do something different. And that's a perfectly fine criticism to have. And sometimes also sometimes like a developer gets a thing wrong, right? And if you're a game developer at home right now, you might be saying, well, it's my game. How did I get something wrong? And the answer is, I write shit all the time that I think maybe I shouldn't have said, or maybe I should have adjusted. That's just the fact of creating something. Imperfections are there. And so this idea of sometimes talking about games in these simpler mechanical terms to explain a problem to some maybe writers feels juvenile, sure, but it shouldn't matter. And also the truth about games is that they're just games, right? I think that's a sticking point for a lot of people too. I love video games and I've spent like a decade engaging with them. They're just video games. It doesn't matter that much.
I want you to dig deep into this, because in that essay, you described games in most mass media as part of trash culture.
Yeah, of course.
A term I love.
Yeah.
And a term that I think is more relevant now than it was even when you wrote it, quite frankly.
Yes.
Can you explain what trash culture is?
Yeah, that's pulling from Pauline Kael mostly, right? And a little bit of Bennett Foddy,
Yeah.
I think, in that piece, which is this idea of, I will explain it by paraphrasing a friend who you may know, who's Jackson Tyler from Abnormal Mapping, a great podcasting network. And one of the things that Jackson has said to me before, which has stood out, and I've quoted at least on one other podcast, is that some of the best stories in video games are about as good as something you'd pick up at an airport bookstore, right? And having that perspective is important. Games are powerful. They can make you feel really cool. They're sometimes doing things mechanically or rhetorically, which are kind of unique and fun. But I've written tens of thousands of words on Metal Gear Solid 2. Metal Gear Solid 2 did not predict the future in the way that some people say. Metal Gear Solid 2 did not rewrite the rules of what it meant to understand internet culture or things like that. It was mostly a game about a kind of annoying fuckboy who did stealth cartwheels, right? And that's important. It's important to remember that most of the things that we are engaging with, even things that are really well put together, they're not going to change the world, and they don't have to, right? They can change a person, they can change you, and that's enough. But some people, I think a trap that people fall into with games, partially because of the stigma that games had coming off from the 90s as children's toys, is they want games to be important. And it's like, important to who and important how? And like, you know what's more important than a game? The community garden in your neighborhood, brother. Like, what are you talking about? Are you, pardon my language here, but like, are you crazy? Like you have to have perspective about the world. And once you have that, or at least once you have a perspective, let's say, you can then worry about whether or not art is profound.
Can I give you my tweaked read of trash culture?
Yeah.
I think that games represent where all culture is heading, which is to experience games is to experience music. It is to experience gallery art. It is to experience play as an art form. It is to experience sport. It is all of these things. And there can be the profound and meaningful in it. And it can also be surrounded by the pop and the trash and the outright bad. And the balance can be all over the place. And I think the reason that we look back at, let's say, a gallery work in a museum or a performance piece is because of the clarity. If it works, it works. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. There are not all these other aspects of it. But I love your comparison to an airplane novel, because I think even cinema foreshadowed this. If you look at great works of cinema, you can look at The Godfather, and it is an airplane novel.
Have you read The Godfather? It's not brilliant.
I mean, yes, but they are taking these things and putting it in a context in which
you can play with them.
Yeah, and yeah, I find that term so compelling. I do wonder how it has changed for you in the era of AI slop.
I mean, well, the complicating factor about AI is that AI aesthetics are the aesthetics of fascism, right? So like, that's a whole other can of worms. So that's the next podcast.
Yes.
One of the benefits of originally made work, besides, which is to say work that doesn't incorporate AI, isn't just like ethical concerns of environmentalism or workplace concerns or ownership concerns over what models something is being trained on. My concern with AI is primarily like, okay, now we can see in our current moment that there is like art which exists in the context of a larger fascist product, or project, I should say, and originally made art, handmade art, therefore is art which embodies a certain kind of resistance, which is a complicated thing to talk about. That being said, I will say I don't think art ever really changes the world, which is kind of I alluded to before. I've talked about speaking to some younger critics. I think some folks, God bless them, want to engage on a project where like criticism is a cultural force which is like transformative to society. And I think that's fine. And I like that idea on its face, but I don't know if art functions that way, or I am personally unconvinced that art functions that way and therefore criticism can function that way.
I am so ready to get the first official post-games merchandise, which instead of guns don't kill people, I do, is going to say art doesn't change the world, I do. Yeah. I think I'm going to sell millions. I'm going to be... Art can
give you the emotional rejuvenation you need to make a correct decision. It can give you sometimes the touchstones or the vocabulary to make a correct decision. But art itself is like, it is luxury to a certain extent.
I'm mixing metaphors with the gun things because guns do kill people. But I do agree that I try to see it as fuel, both in terms of my output and my input. Could you give me an example of when criticism has helped you personally? Like, where has it refueled you? Where has it given you that?
That is a tricky question. It's a very complicated question. Process matters to me. So this will be like a cop-out answer, but I think it will talk, I can wrap it around to talk about this current moment. Writing is like very soothing to me. The process of writing, it's like oxygen to me. I need it more than anything. This is why, like, even when I'm not writing games criticism right now, which I'm a freelance writer, but I only write criticism when I want to. I'm in a very privileged position in that way. Yeah. And then in my free time, I write like fan fiction or whatever. I just constantly write though, because it makes me feel good. Mentorship helped a lot, which is to say that writing and criticism as a community project was meaningful to me, whether that was folks who are not really visible anymore, but engaging with Zolani Stewart or like Lana Polanski back in the day and writing for the Arcade Review and being able to sit down with folks and be messy and weird and having the permission to do that is very good. It can also be Austin, who was my editor on a lot of stuff, Austin Walker, and who particularly helped me understand two things, which is a lot of vocabulary that I used to sharpen my understanding of things. And then also criticism or writing as lyricism. The fact that criticism doesn't have to be this like really staccato, strict thing, but can be loose. And so for me, the ways that criticism has really mattered or changed to me is not embodied in a single piece of writing, but rather in the moments where I can collaborate with others and have their insights push me to be more myself, or conversely, rein in my worst impulses. This is not something that everyone has access to anymore, which is a curious problem for criticism right now, which is that there's kind of a mentorship problem, but that's like a whole other can of worms, right? Because there's just not a lot of places to write. There's not a lot of editors out there. More people are flying solo. It's a different kind of ecosystem. So that kind of communal experience doesn't always exist in criticism anymore, I suspect, at the very least. It can exist.
And you mentioned earlier on, weirdly, the in conflict letter series that were written early on in both of our time.
I think a lot of like Kirk and Leigh Alexander like writing to each other about Final Fantasy VII or something, or like Cameron Kunzelman would write something and then I would disagree and I would write a blog post, and that didn't poison my relationship with Cameron, who I think is brilliant, but at times I've disagreed with, right? And like that sort of stuff doesn't exist quite as much anymore, it feels like.
Yeah, and it sharpens, like diamond sharpens diamond, stone sharpens stone. I want to flip that a little bit of pieces that you've read. Are there any pieces that have stuck with you, that follow you around not that you've written, but that you've read or watched or heard over the years?
There's a piece about Metal Gear Solid 5 for the New York Times, which I still really like. I can't remember the author's name. New York. I think it's literally called Playing Metal Gear Solid 5, The Phantom Pain. Yes, this is by Jamil John Kochai. I'm butchering that last name. This is one that's lived with me very much because it's also kind of an interesting one to me. This was published on December 30th, 2019 in, the New Yorker, not the New York Times. I was close. And it is fundamentally like very personal, very new games journalism-y way.
Published under their fiction banner, I will add.
Yes, right. I'll also be frank, a lot of the pieces that have stuck with me are pieces that I disagree with over the years. It's a lot of like Ian Bogost games are better without stories because they remind me of the things that I fundamentally disagree with. I was part of a cadre of writers who particularly took a strong stance against a kind of, I would say, a games educator mindset, which we called formalism, which was about systems and how games are important because of the mechanisms interacting and then producing an effect. My position is like games are important because of the emotions that they make us feel, right? Not because of the mechanisms or like or the things that they're performing. So like some of the things I still hold on to in my heart are the things I hated, which is fair too. But this Metal Gear Solid 5 piece, I think, is maybe one of the most spectacular pieces ever written. There's challenging stuff out there too. There's an old new games journalism piece, which I don't even know if you can find anymore. I'm not going to say the word, but I will say it is called Bow N-Word, which is very famous.
Yeah.
It is about, I believe they were playing Call of Duty and someone is just...
I think it was Jedi Knight.
Oh, that's right. It is. It's Jedi Knight.
Yeah.
It is about the experience that writer had with someone over voice chat in that game. And that has always stuck with me too. That's an interesting one because it is talking both about like what a game allows to happen mechanically or systemically, and then also what this produces as like a social phenomenon or a social moment. And it's complicated and difficult. And I don't even know where you could find a copy of that anymore. Probably in a Wayback Machine somewhere.
I will include a link. I've saved a PDF for a course that I did a decade ago.
That's like,
right. It's nearly lost to time.
That's maybe one of the most killer pieces of writing that's ever happened, I think, involving games. That one lives in my brain constantly.
Nothing gets at the just complete dissolving of the internet like how hard it is to find that piece, which, again, it is unquestionably one of, I would say, probably the 5 or 10 most important pieces.
Yeah, it's definitely up there, for sure.
Well, last thing for you, which is in your piece, and we're going back to the games criticism as a kindness, you talk about the difference between what a piece of media says and how a critic hears it, and how those two things can coexist and they can be different. How do you think about that dynamic with your readership? You are writing a work of criticism that also acts as a work of art. They're going to take it in different ways.
Your audience can't see it, but I gave you a big shrug. Right? It's complicated. So I'll tell you a true story right now, which is I'm writing a piece of fan fiction. I got feedback from someone which I thought was very, very harsh, and I literally wrote back to them saying, "Hey, I can't worry about you anymore. I can't worry about making my writing the thing that pleases you." They took it about as well as you might expect someone on the internet might take that sort of comment. But I've been thinking about that for a while, and I think it at least does get to a feeling I have about art or writing or whatever, which is like, once I've published it, it's not mine. It doesn't matter. I've had people assume everything about my character because of what I've written, right? Which is to say, I've had people assume that I am more radical than I am. I've had people assume that I am more stodgy than I am. I've had people assume that I only like socially progressive work. I've had people assume that I don't like XYZ or whatever. It's like, it's not true. I don't care. The people who know me know me. My work is my work. A piece of myself is in that work. Hopefully you find it. Hopefully I've written it well enough that it is there in a true way. But I can't worry about it. I'm in my 30s. Like, And it's not, and also again, kind of back to what I've alluded to over the course of our conversation, is it's not that serious. I'm flattered, and this sounds like I'm bragging, and I don't mean it to be. I hope you understand what I mean. But I've had people who have said, "Hey, your writing has changed my life," and I go, "Okay, thank you. That's wonderful." No disrespect to those people. That's not why I wrote. Right? I didn't write to change your life. Very often I wrote to make money. And the life-changing stuff happened on the side. If I was lucky, that's still the case now, right? Like I've been a year away from Double Fine. I am still only writing kind of when I need to, but like I'm leaving San Francisco by the end of the year. I can't live here. Sometimes I'm writing to pay the bills. The complex reality of writing is that like it's a little bit of everything. It's mercenary, it's selfish. Sometimes it's meant to be communal and loving and touching. But the important thing for any writer to remember, or any creator to realize, is like once it's out there, you're done. You've done it, and you don't need to worry about what other people think. I love when people comment on my pieces or give me feedback or talk with me. It's very kind and very affecting and very moving. But I'm done with it. Once the thing's out there, I'm done with it. I'm moving on. I'm on to the next thing.
I will agree with that and contradict it just a little,
Sure.
Which is to say, for everyone listening, if you're lucky enough and you're a writer, 99.9% of the time, you write anything on the internet, and you're lucky if it even stays there. And that 0.01% of the time, an asshole like me messages you 6 years later and says, "Can we get on a podcast and talk about a single piece?"
Some of it sticks, but that's
does.
also the truth of it, right? Where it's like I've written probably 10,000 things at a minimum.
Yeah.
And like I can name 3 of which that I love and 3 of which that people still talk to me about. But those 3 are still important. And so when I say that once I publish a thing, I lose ownership of it, that's not me being unappreciative of the people who do come back to me. It is just also a true fact of like, once it's out there, I cannot control what's in the heart of another person, right? I can't control what they get from it. I can hope that I wrote well enough that they see what I see in a piece of work or something, but I have no guarantee of that, right?
Absolutely. Well, Harper, thank you so much for doing this. It is always such a treat to hear your thoughts and take a peek inside your brain.
It's exciting.
Together we will now throw this bottle into the ocean, where it will be received and we will never see it again.
I'm going to go get a haircut.
That sounds great. Where should people follow your work?
Where should people follow my work? That's kind of tricky. I still have a personal website, which is transgamerthoughts.com, which I don't always use. It's technically just a redirect URL for my original Tumblr that I used to write stuff on still, and I'll still sometimes post on there. So personal blog stuff will go there. You can usually find me on Kotaku very often right now. I'm still working very closely with some of my coworkers who are at that site, but in a freelancer capacity. I just wrote a piece on Metal Gear Solid 4 that went up yesterday. You can find me even on AO3 for fan fiction. You look me up on Blue Sky, you'll find all that stuff. If you read a thing of mine and you do have thoughts, I would love to hear them. Leave a comment on whatever website you're on, and I do look at them. I'm not always replying to them or something, but I do look at them, so that'll be good. But as I've gotten older, I've become a bit more private of a person, so my work just pops up is kind of how it goes.
I think that is perfect. Thank you so much. Welcome to the Patreon bonus section. You know how this works. For Patreon subscribers, I have something extra for you. I asked y'all to send in your most pressing or interesting or just strange questions about how video game reviews work. Questions about the scoring system or what's the difference between reviews and criticism. And I dig into a lot of those. You provided a lot of really good questions, and I hope that my answers live up to what you sent over. For everybody else, don't worry about it. We'll be wrapping up the show in just a short bit, so let us split. The summer of criticism has officially kicked off, and I promise I am going to be feeling better for the rest of it. Next week, Christian Donlin joins us for part 2 of the series, What's the Point of Video Game Reviews? And you will have to listen then to learn more because, friends, my voice is nearly gone. Until then, a reminder, post-game supporters get the show and the newsletter early on Fridays at 5 p.m. Eastern, usually way earlier. They get extra acts and bonus materials. This week, Patreon listeners got a really meaty Q&A about how video game reviews operate and why they can sometimes frustrate us. Plus, each month, subscribers get a bonus episode in my ongoing series, Past Games, in which I share deep dive histories into the gaming anniversaries of 2026. The latest episode, if you're listening on the free feed, it has just gone live. It is about the history of the original Tomb Raider, and it is very fascinating. I think you will enjoy it. And no ads on anything. Subscribe to the Patreon at patreon.com/postgames. Subscribe to the newsletter for free at post.games. Postgames logo by James Bareham. Theme by Mark Sparling. Additional music from Epidemic Sound. And a special thank you to this week's guest, Harper J. All interviews are edited for concision, clarity. Like the show, leave a review on Apple or Spotify, or consider sharing the show with a friend. I'll see you next week.